All right, welcome to Bungalows for Bachelors number 7. Today we are going to be discussing cost estimating, material estimating, and those things to try to figure out, can we afford to build things? Because it's important to know if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, then you should not start. We're going to go ahead and jump in here once I remember to share the screen. Hit me to Zoom, share screen. All righty. Okay, so still in phase one pre-construction. Going to be a little while before we get to actually touch anything and build anything, but we're getting closer. Material and cost estimating. So what does a cost estimate look like? Well, a cost estimate is just another way of describing a budget or a estimate to build or anything like that. Just the word I used. Here is an example of an Excel sheet that was my baseline for bidding construction projects when I was doing that beforehand. It is very thorough, but it is not all inclusive. The categories are mostly in order of construction. The first category, pre-construction costs, bunch of stuff in here. We'll go through more of this detail later. Next category, site development costs. And then of course you got site preparation, which is sort of a different style, different category. And then you're going to start to build the house itself. Of course, there's foundation costs. There's main structure costs. You'll see framing and siding materials is in here. It's just a piece of this. We will discuss on how complicated that can be later. General trade costs is basically a lot of the stuff that has to do with literally the main trades that are building the structure and the systems of the house. And then interior finishing costs is exactly what that sounds like. It's finishing out everything else inside the house. There's always more categories and stuff we can add here and stuff we remove, but this is sort of a baseline that I start with each time. So here's an example. There are two columns. There's a projected column and there's an actual column. There's a notes column for describing things. If you know, like you find a source of concrete you want to buy, or they're the only source, you would write it in here. You'd write down what their costs are, so stuff like that. And this is where we figure out how much a project is going to cost. So there's that, and we will jump back into this. So that's what one might look like. It can be in Excel, it could be in other software, but Excel is fairly common. So why would you perform a cost estimate? Well, the main reason is that some things you can't afford to build, and you may have a great dream and a great project you would love to have and love to build, but a lot of times doing a cost estimate is a slap in the face of reality, in that, oh wow, these things are expensive, or oh wow, the market's really crazy with lumber right now, so I can't afford to build it right now, or something like that. So yeah, so there's usually a budget. You gotta figure out how much money you have to spend on something, or in some cases you don't. For example, the building that I'm trying to build on this property I'm buying is not necessarily going to be budget limited. It's going to be time limited. So it's going to be more of I want to include these processes and these features. If it costs me more money, it's just going to take longer to build. That's the way I'm approaching it, within reason, of course. So you want to prioritize where the money is going. And what I mean by that is, if you fill out your whole budget and you see the price of the house and you can't afford it, then you can look at different trades and different things. Like maybe your cabinetry is crazy and you're close to being in budget. And if you just simplify your cabinetry a little bit, remove a few things, not go so crazy, then maybe you can come into budget without affecting any other part of the house. Or maybe you have a lot of square footage of tile and you want to get a cheaper material like laminate. You can change numbers and you can move things around. So that's where the value of this is. You can look at everything with numbers and say, wow, what do I have to do to this that can make me afford to build it? Or if you're under budget, which probably usually doesn't happen, actually almost never happens, then you can look at the categories and say, well, what do I want to upgrade? What can I do better with? Maybe I can do more square footage. Maybe what is it? So, and of course, it is a good idea to have familiarity with the market. Lumber and other materials do vary in prices depending on what the economy is doing, depending on what the supply is doing, and of course what the demand is, of course. But those are some reasons on why you'd want to be doing this kind of thing and understanding where things are at. So before we can do any costing, we have to know what the materials are to cost. So let's talk a little bit about material estimating. In this particular page, we are going to specifically talk about lumber. Lumber is going to generally apply to lumber, siding, and hardware. These are the main materials that are going to make the structure of a house, and that's what we are mostly referring to here. And siding is included in that because siding used to be wood, and fiber cement siding is kind of just lumped in with that, even though it's not wood. So what are some potential sources of these material estimates? Well, if you want to build a house and you need a material estimate for this lumber package, right? Well, one of the things you could do is if you go to a contractor who's a framer and you ask them for a bid on your plans, and there are no structural plans to define the wood, or maybe there are, either way, you can request from that framer, assuming he will do it, to manage the materials. So he's going to be responsible for procurement of the materials. He's going to be responsible for counting it, and he's going to include that all in his bid price. And that's what usually you're going to end up paying for all the material. And then you're going to pay for probably 10% extra or something on top of that because he had to spend all the time getting all the materials and managing this. And that takes time and effort. So that's a fair thing. But that's one way to get to figure out where all these materials are coming from and how much do I need? How many 2x4s do I need? How many studs do I need? So another one could be a material supply company. For example, if you have a material supply company who's local that sells lumber, and you take your plans to them and you say, here's what I want to build. I would like to buy all my lumber from you. Can you, they want to sell you the lumber. So they're going to invest in estimating somewhere, usually a third party, and they will take those plans to the third party, and they probably have some kind of deal worked out. And they will get the estimate on the materials. They'll take care of it. And then the material supply company will produce the list, and then they will put that list in a estimate sheet that's going to have all these itemized materials and a price on it. So that is one way to get it, is through a material supplier. And of course, you could always find your own estimating company. They exist. They're basically people with a ton of experience in construction who can look at plans and know how to estimate things and count things. And that's one way to do it. You can also use building information modeling software like Chief Architect, the one that I use, or some other kind of estimating software. Now, this is sort of a gray area because what you don't want to do is you don't want to build a house that requires $50,000 of lumber and rely on software to spit out a list of materials that costs $50,000, because you're going to spend $50,000 on it and the computer might not be right, basically. So this is one of those tools that is very useful, but it has to be used with by somebody who understands what the numbers should be, if the numbers are reasonable. And maybe you only pick and choose what numbers you can pull out of it. And I'll show you some of that in a second here. But that's another way to do it. And then of course you can always do the material estimating. If you have enough understanding of how things are put together, you can understand that, okay, I'm going to take my sheeting goods and I'm going to stand them up against the wall and I'm going around the house. And so whatever my linear foot around the house divided by 4 feet is, then that's about how many sheets I need. So, depending on what you can also do your own materials estimate. And that's kind of where I started. I picked up my own list and things like that. So we're going to jump in here to some examples. Let's see. So here's an example of, let me make sure it opens the file here. And I didn't want to open the file, so I'm going to manually open the file. All right. So here's an example of a project that I did in Canyon Lake, where I counted all of the materials. I did it in Excel, and you start at the bottom and you work your way up. And the way I did it was I think about, okay, I'm building it. what's the material I need to do the next step? What's the material I need to do the next step? And I basically categorize everything, and then I list out each piece and everything that I need from the bottom all the way up. So your studs, your headers, fire blocking that needs to be in the walls, shear blocking, bracing lumber as like a tool lumber for holding walls straight, posts, tall studs, straps, special hardware, nails, special pins for nailing things down. And then I got some stairway stuff in here because there was a stairway on this first floor. And then I talk about the lower floor system, a temporary guardrail for holding some stuff up, screws to hold the guardrail on, beams that are in the floor system. I mean, you name it. You just start listing everything out that you need. This, of course, requires some familiarity with material selection, and also to do this the way I did it, there was already an engineered plan done. So I already knew exactly what beam sizes I needed and stuff like that. So there has to be some kind of structural plan sort of in place already. Whoever's doing this takeoff is usually the one, if there's no engineer involved, whoever does this is the one who's deciding the framing plan. They're deciding what beams I'm going to buy, where I'm going to put them, how I'm going to hold the house up, because they're buying the lumber for it. So they're anticipating using it in a certain way. If there's an engineer who does a framing plan or somebody else who does a framing plan, then that framing plan can be followed and they can just count the members on that plan. So that's basically that. So yeah, all the materials and all the stuff in here. So this was a good list to have, but it was not super useful in terms of handing it off to a lumberyard, for example, because there's just way too many items in here. There's a bunch of repeats and stuff, and I'll explain a little bit later why that's not convenient. But let's get back into this. So that's that guy. In terms of the building information modeling software, we're going to open up. Oh, okay. Learn how to use this computer here. There we go. All right, so here's the garage. This is the garage. It's going to be the first thing that is built after this tiny shed thing. This is going to be a serious structure that's getting built on the property. The way I can use this software to do my thing and to hide this. Hide floating. Okay, that's good. All right, so the way I can use material estimates in this program is I have this model generated such that the computer knows that this garage exists. So it's got this in its brain. It does all of its math. It's got all of its 3D calculations going on. If I were to open up the framing plan, it will show me all of the intended wood members and their directions. So this may or may not be how I want to build it. In fact, I know I'm not going to do it this way because the ceiling joists are running the wrong direction. I need them to be parallel with my rafters because of how I intend to solve this structurally. But, it's got some headers in here. It's got studs. It's got plates. There's something going on here. And, of course, in this, you can see roof. You can see shingles and stuff like that. So if I go to my tools, I can create a materials list using this software. That is one of the features of the software. I do not trust it, like without a doubt. I have to read through everything and make sure it makes sense. It's somewhat limited, but it does do a lot of things well. For example, in the foundation, it will tell me that I need 95 feet of foam sill seal that's 6 inches wide. In this case, I don't know why it actually says 6 inches wide. That shouldn't say that. It should say 2. So this is why we don't trust it, explicitly. But, I need approximately 95 feet. That's a good number to know. I might trust that number because, how many rolls? I need a 50-foot roll. I need 2 50-foot rolls to do this house. Perfect. Do this garage. There's some slab stuff in here. I don't trust its slab design because it's not engineering the slabs or anything like that. So I pretty much ignore that. But framing can be somewhat useful. It's decent at counting studs if I'm going to follow a typical stud framing design, like just 16 center, 2x4s, nothing crazy. I can rely on this somewhat well. Siding, it's very good at knowing square footages of siding area and telling me how many laps I need, how many sheets of OSB I need. House wrap area, it's very good at all those things. Exterior trim, it'll tell me some of that stuff. Roofing, I use roofing frequently to describe how much roofing area I need. I don't have to do any math because the roof is sloped and it's got overhangs and this, that, and the other. I just go look and it says I have 498.96 square feet of asphalt roofing. So I'll, round up a little bit and get some roof for that, get some asphalt shingles for that. Very useful there. Insulation is somewhat useful as well. It knows that I got to put full height bats in the walls, and I will need 27 of them. So it can be quite useful. Sheetrock, same thing. Windows, doors, electrical. How many fixtures I got in here? So it can summarize some stuff pretty well. But this is just an example of building information modeling software, and I don't want to save this. And how we would use it to do estimating stuff. And then, of course, there's always AutoCAD. And AutoCAD is useful if you know how to draw and you know how to build things, because you're basically just building it on paper to count. So this 3-car garage, 2-car garage in this case, at this point, it got redesigned. I didn't end up building this, but I did a lot of planning on it and I did a lot of estimating. This is what the floor plan looked like. And I can just copy this and paste it and basically get some areas of the foundation. This is how I do my estimating of foundations. Since I know beam depths and rebar sizes and stuff like that, I do it kind of by hand. So if I do this and I click on this area and I had properties open, it would tell me how much area is there. And that can tell me how much concrete volume I about need. So I can find out how many yards of concrete I need. And then I can find out, okay, these are all the pads built up in between that are going to create these beams. How much base do I need on top of my pads that's going to fill in here? So I can get volumes doing that. I can find out the linear length of forms I'm going to need to go around this thing. I can figure out special rebar bends and things I'm going to need depending on the intersection type. I can do all of my plating and walls in here and figure out how many studs I need. I like to do this. It's kind of picky. Most people just buy plate stock and then just have extra, no big deal. But I like to be specific to not waste any material. In here, I've got my studs all figured out already. I've got all this stuff in here. So what I can do is, these are special items. I can click on one. Let me open up. So if I click on this one 2x6 stud, actually 2x4, and then I tell command to select all the other ones that are like it, I can get a count over here on the side of the screen that tells me there's 53 of them. So I can use the software to count things for me if I know how to use it properly. Now, it does take a lot of time to set all this up. So, the time trade-off is accuracy in this case. So studs, sill seal lengths, special headers above windows, I will label it. In this case, I drew a board. Garage headers most headers in a 2x4 wall need a 7/16 or half-inch sheathing shimmed between the two pieces of wood so you get the full wall thickness. So I drew a sheet here to figure out how many pieces of sheet I would need to do my headers. And then, of course, I got curb rebar. I got rebar for the mat of the foundation. I got, more headers in here. I drew some tall walls to figure out there's a stairway here, how tall my studs were going to be, special numbers, my roof sheeting, all kinds of stuff is on here. The second floor had some sheets. They wanted partial flooring in here, so I figured out how many sheets I need doing that. I figured out how much tape I need to go around to tape all my seams off around windows and stuff like that. There's a storm going on, so if you hear noise, there's thunder and lightning. We might get tornadoes and cool stuff. Sheetrock, I figured out how much stuff was getting rocked. Their garage wasn't getting sheetrock. They just wanted it here. So, you can do all kinds of stuff in AutoCAD. That's one more tool. So that is some examples of some of the tools. We'll go ahead and move on to everything else. So when you are material estimating the lumber, like I said in that the big sheet, when you're cost estimating lumber and framing and building a structure is one small item of the whole pie, and it's a huge item. So it's a lot of work to put all this together. And when we go back and look at it again, you'll see how much of an effect it has and how much time it takes. But everything else also needs to be thought of. And to find everything else, You pretty much either have somebody who knows what's going to be in a house, a builder will know. Like I showed you in Chief Architect, you can use building information modeling software to find out window counts, door counts, hardware counts, stuff like that. Excuse me. Um, and then of course you can always learn about how to read plans, how to make lists, how to use Excel, how construction happens in general, so that you can know how to count these things on your own. But that's how we get to the materials. Now that we have a huge list of materials, we can start to figure out how much these things are going to cost. So, of course, you can do some generic suppliers like Home Depot, Lowe's, McCoy's, but it's usually a good idea to find your local building supplier because they're going to be usually more acquainted with the area, the materials, the people, maybe other subcontractors that you want to find and work with. It's going to be a better plug-in. When you start working with big names like Home Depot and Lowe's, McCoy's isn't so bad. McCoy's is pretty personal. They do a good job. But Home Depot and Lowe's are basically, they're box stores, right? You go there and talk to somebody about a lumber thing you need, and you're just talking to some guy who works at Home Depot. He may not know anything about construction. That's not really the same product. So always a good idea to go to a local building supplier because when you're building something at this scale and you have a lot of different things you're going to need, having a building supplier who's going to get most of those things for you is just going to save you a lot of headache because they're gonna want to help you. I mean, that's their business, that's their job, that's what they love doing, helping people build stuff. So, but those are some of the places you can find the costs. And once you have some costs, you can pretty much look at filling out the rest of the sheet in two different ways. You have this huge list of materials and their quantities. Now you need to put a cost on all of those materials. You can do it yourself, which I, in this case, called self-filling of the table, where you go through, let's say you're going to build a shed, something simple. You have this list of things. You go through, you find the cost of a 2x4 that's 8 feet long at Home Depot at your store. Boom, put the price in. Find the price of a 2x4 that's 10 feet long. Boom, put the price in. You could see how that gets tedious when there's 100 different items on your list, especially when you're building a house, when there's hundreds and hundreds of items. So that's really time consuming, which is why certain building suppliers do it for you as a service. Now, the trade-off here is you are outsourcing somebody else's ability to label and match the products that you want with what they have or what they don't have, and the prices associated. So there's going to be a certain amount of error that's built into that, which is going to increase the amount of time somehow, because either the error is followed all the way to the delivery of the material and you're like, oh crap, I didn't need this, or oh, where's this, I needed that, and you didn't check the list properly, which we're going to go over an example later, and now all of a sudden you are stuck with the wrong materials or don't have enough materials, something like that. So there's some value in doing it all yourself, and there's value in outsourcing it. Like I said, the basic premise is, do you want to spend the time doing it and guarantee that accuracy? Or are you willing to outsource that and then do a thorough job overlooking those lists and cross-checking things to move forward with that? It's the same thing on a small scale. Like if I need 10 2x4s, I can go pick out 10 2x4s off the shelf that are nice and straight that I like. Or I could do an online order and have them put it together and bring it to the front of the store and put in a truck for me. You're going to get a different result based on how much you invest and how much you're doing there. So when you're building a house or a garage or something big, you're never going to be picking out all of your material. That's just, unless you have way too much free time, that's not something you're going to do. That kind of stuff is going to get picked out by the store. It's going to be in stacks. It's going to be in bundles, in large quantities, and it's going to be delivered to your site. So there's only so much you can do. So the best example of this premise and complication is the Canyon Lake house that I built, where I was responsible for sourcing all of the materials for this guy's 3-story house. There were two big building suppliers he was going to go with. 84 Lumber was more of a local, and McCoy's is more of a chain. So we compared the two in the beginning. Basically what happened was I created this huge list of materials, which I showed you already. And let me see if it'll open up again. Okay, so it's right here. So I created this huge list, which was broken up way too specifically. I mean, this is how I made the list, so it's fine. But if these are way too many items. There's duplicates on here. So the 2x6, 20 feet long is here, but it's also somewhere else. So that's a bad idea. So the way I fixed that was I created a consolidated list that looks like this, which is just 2 pages. That's it. So I consolidated everything and summarized everything. So they made a list off of this one, and we moved forward. And basically what happened is I send them this list, and then they send me their list. And this is what 84 Lumber came back with. This is what it looks like when you get a lumber bid back. It's got all these information, product information. It's an estimate. And then it's going to start itemizing all of these things. And there's some skill and experience in being able to read the items on this list. Obviously, a lot of the lumber is going to be fairly straightforward. But knowing the meanings of all this stuff, for example, 2x4x16, number 2 and better, kiln dried spruce pine fir board. It's good to know all these things so that you know what you're buying on these lists. So, TNG, tongue and groove, stuff like that. A lot of hardy products in here. 24-inch by 8-foot cedar mill, solid soffit, HC10. Just knowing the meanings of all these things is important. But this is what it looks like. And one of the things that happened was they got it wrong. And they got it wrong, like, I don't know, somewhere between 8 and 10 times. So they send me this list back, and my job is to check to make sure their list matches my list, because there's a lot of items on here. And that is where these errors, I can't find the image, of course. Let me go find the image myself then. So there are 2 images in here that I would like to share. So here's an example of what I had to do is I printed this out on paper, and then the green is showing that they matched, everything was good and hunky-dory. And the red is, there's stuff wrong here, and there's just weird stuff going on. So I had to tell them I rewrote the whole thing because they weren't even close. And basically tell them, hey, this is wrong. Like, this is an order list. If they were to tell them, hey, go ahead and buy it, they're going to buy these things and deliver them. They don't care that it's wrong. I mean, it's not good, but like this, it's not a huge deal. And they have a lot of this going on. So you have to make sure that this stuff is correct. This is very, very important. And then, of course, on this one, here's just some more notes on errors on trim. Here they said, yeah, here we go. So needs to be 200 4-inch trim. They put 280. That's not the same thing. That's 80 extra, which is quite a bit more money. So it's stuff like this that you got to catch, when you're handing this responsibility off to somebody else. So, go back in here, train of thought, go back to my example. So that's what happened. It's a lot of back and forth. And what we found in the beginning was 84 Lumber. I had to go back and forth like 8, 10 times. We submitted to McCoy's. Their list was correct the first time. They were missing, they were both missing some big major pieces in terms of comparing costs and stuff like that. But McCoy's didn't have all these errors all over it. So there was actually a preference from the owner to go with McCoy's as supplier because they weren't getting the list wrong. However, an important thing that was caught was some builders, some suppliers have better access to materials. 84 Lumber is the supplier for most of the home construction in the San Antonio area. So they got some good roots and they got good connections. At the time this was happening, there was a shortage in LVL engineered beam material that this guy had a few of in his plan. And so we asked McCoy's, hey, when can you actually get these things delivered? And they said, 13 to 14 weeks, maybe, basically. And 84 Lumber said, we have it on the yard. So you have to consider all those factors. And we ended up going with 84 Lumber because, it was better time spent fixing all their problems and fixing all their lists than just and getting access to those engineered materials faster. So that was what we chose in that decision. But this is what can happen when you start to outsource and you got to check materials and stuff like that. Now, there is some serious value and serious joy and handing somebody a list of quantities of materials and getting it back with prices on everything. I mean, you got totals, you got taxes, you got, shipping, the whole thing. It's all right there. Now, some of it might not be correct, but you didn't have to go find each one of those prices. Somebody else did that for you. You didn't spend the time doing it. So, there's something to be said for that. So after the example, let's talk a little bit about how you could learn more if you would like to learn more about this kind of thing. So the first thing I would recommend specifically about framing, if you don't have a huge understanding of how this stuff is estimated, it can be simple, it can be complicated. But you can watch a YouTube video of material takeoff tips #1, figuring studs, sheathing, siding, roofing, and more by Matt Bangs Wood. Matt Bangs Wood is an excellent YouTuber. He is a framer. He has started a nonprofit, and he's got a ton of super high quality content framing tons of different stuff over in California. So they frame things a little bit differently over there because they got earthquakes, but it's really cool to see his content. He's got a lot of good stuff, so you can check out more stuff by him. You can always read The Efficient Carpenter by Larry Hahn. He talks a lot more about framing in that. He is a framer from, I think the 60s and 70s, production framer. Basically just nailed the framing process, how to do everything as fast as possible. A super good book. And in the book, he talks about in the beginning how to bid framing and how to do quantities on your framing. So it's another source that gives you a little bit different of a method on, okay, I want to build this shed. How do I estimate my materials? There's another way to do it. Believe it or not, his method is very efficient. So in general, you can familiarize yourself with how materials are used in a house, because the more you understand about how stuff is put together, the more you can understand how to estimate how to buy the stuff that's going to be put together. And that helps with, types of wasted materials and stuff like that. So that's basically one thing you can do. You can practice using Excel in general, just knowing how to use the software to calculate things, make tables, use equations, save yourself time that way. That's another thing that's going to help you learn how to do this on your own better. And it would be great if you stop by your local building supplier if you're in a particular area and just meet the people who work there, because if you have building projects and stuff like that, you're going to want to know them and they're going to want to know you, and you can, everybody can win from a relationship like that. So it's a good group of people to know. But that said, that concludes the lesson on cost estimating and materials and that stuff. So I'm going to stop my share and stop the recording. Thanks you for watching.